Before there was an institution, before handbooks, councils, or standardized leadership, authority in the church existed almost entirely through relationship. Joseph Smith did not lead a system, he led people. His authority wasn't enforced by bureaucracy or policy. It was accepted because those around him believed he spoke for God in real time. Understanding that distinction is essential if we want to understand how prophetic authority later became institutional. In the earliest years of the church, Joseph Smith's authority functioned in conversation. Revelation often came in response to questions from members, disagreements among leaders, or practical problems facing small communities. Early records show that instructions were given, clarified, revised, and sometimes replaced. Authority was not distant or fixed, it was immediate and adaptive. So pause and consider this. How does authority function when it is still forming, still responsive, and still open to negotiation? Joseph Smith did not begin with a fully defined theology or governance structure. Many early doctrines developed gradually, often in response to lived experience. Members participated in this process. They asked questions, raised concerns, and sometimes struggled openly with what they were being taught. Authority worked because trust worked. People followed Joseph Smith not because dissent was unthinkable, but because they believed revelation was unfolding in front of them. What kind of leadership depends more on belief than enforcement? As the church grew, that dynamic began to shift. Conflict increased, opposition intensified, legal pressure mounted. What had once been a small relational movement became a growing community under constant threat. In that environment, flexibility became riskier. Authority needed to stabilize. Decisions needed to hold. Joseph Smith's role changed as expectations changed. Revelation became more formalized. Leadership became more defined. At what point does authority stop being conversational and start becoming protective? This transition matters because it shaped everything that came after. The way Joseph Smith exercised authority, personal, revelatory, and relational set expectations that later leaders would inherit. But those expectations would eventually collide with scale. What works for dozens doesn't work for thousands. What works for movement doesn't always work for permanence. Can an authority model built on intimacy survive institutional growth without changing its nature? Importantly, early saints didn't experience this shift as loss. They experienced it as necessity. Stability meant survival. Structure meant endurance. Authority became something to preserve, not just participate in. By the time Joseph Smith was killed in 1844, the church was already wrestling with how to carry prophetic authority forward without the man who embodied it. That question would define the next era. Understanding Joseph Smith this way doesn't require defending or condemning him. It requires recognizing that authority did not arrive fully formed. It evolved, it adapted, and it carried assumptions forward. When later leaders emphasized obedience, unity, and loyalty, they weren't inventing authority from nothing. They were building on a foundation of trust Joseph Smith had established under very different conditions. How much of later obedience culture was inherited rather than designed? This is why beginning the Joseph Smith story with authority, not controversy, matters. Before we ask what Joseph Smith taught, we have to ask how he led. Before we debate doctrine, we have to understand the environment in which it emerged. Authority began as something relational, fragile, and human. Only later did it become structured, guarded, and institutional. History doesn't ask us to choose between faith and understanding. It invites us to see how leadership develops under pressure. Joseph Smith didn't found an institution, he founded a movement. Everything that followed was shaped by how that movement learned to survive. When authority begins as personal trust and later becomes institutional power, what changes and what remains? Is faith strengthened when authority adapts or when it stays the same? If you value LDS history examined carefully, honestly, and without shortcuts, follow for more and share your thoughts below. The conversation is just beginning.